Hi, Pastor Nathan Decker with your hashtag Better Together devotion for today. My favorite gospel is the Gospel of Mark. It's the gospel that I read for the first time when I was around 16 years old. It's the gospel that convinced me to become a person of faith, Christian. And one of the things about the Gospel of Mark that intrigues me is that there's all these miracles that Jesus does that actually relate to what he's teaching and doing. And so the miracles become, in essence, living sermons. They become miracles that teach us some things. In Mark's Gospel, chapter 8, is a great example of this. Chapter 8, around verse 22, Jesus has just laid out for his disciples, we're going to Jerusalem. We're going to go through some bad times. I'm going to die, and 3 days later, I'll rise again. And the disciples are kind of lost on this aspect because they've just said, you're the Christ, you're the Messiah. Now you're talking about death? We don't get it. Well, in the gospel story, right next door to this amazing moment where Jesus has this conversation about who am I, and the disciples are saying, you're the Christ, there is this weird healing story. It's the only one like it in any of the gospels where Jesus heals someone and it doesn't quite take all the way. He has to touch the man again. There's this blind man. He's there, he's blind, he can't see. And so Jesus makes some mud and puts it on his eyes and heals him and says, okay, what do you see? And the man says, I can see, but I see people, but they look like trees walking around. Now, for any of you who are nearsighted, you'll know what this is like because you can see something far off in the distance, but you can't quite see it clearly. It's just not right. It's kind of looking through some foggy glass windows or something because everything's kind of still blurry. You can see movement, you can make out forms and shapes, but you really can't see it clearly. I was born nearsighted. I understand this. It wasn't until much later in life as a teenager that I saw clouds with the crispness and the edges for the first time and understood why everybody was pointing and saying, hey, I see a dog in that cloud, where before I'd only seen smears of white. Jesus' miracle relates to the disciples' understanding about who Jesus is. They can see that he's the Christ, he's the Messiah, but they don't see clearly. They're making out some movement, they're making out a form, but they're not quite sure about what he's going to be about who the Messiah is meant to be. So many times for us as people of faith, we are like that. We see aspects of God, we see what Jesus is about, we see what God is doing in our midst, but we don't see it clearly. And like the blind man, we need to tell Jesus, do it again. Touch me again. I need to be healed again. I need some clarification on the vision. I need some clarification on the direction for my life. I need to be touched again, Jesus. Won't you do it again? So many of us, we think, oh, got it, figured it out, faith, got it. I know the answers. Only to find that those answers are not very clear after all. And we need to go back to Jesus one more time. Encountering Jesus again and again and again in our lives, knowing that we will never see it fully clearly until we are truly following after the Master. Take time today to say a prayer. Ask Jesus to touch you one more time, to help you see clearly through what you're going through. And when you do, we'll all be better together.